type of deal that would get 30 plus offers and 9 rounds of best and final.
My question with these projects in this environment, if it's that easy, why aren't you doing it?
This is the type of product that the syndicator crowd loves. It's the 70s, 80 built stuff.
It kind of smells like there's a debt cliff coming up on this, that this thing is going to go underwater very quickly.
And if the pitch here is to remove the price competitive nature by doing this mark to market, that's a razor's edge.
This has to be maybe the single worst deal that I've seen in all week.
All right, welcome to the Real Estate Anonymous podcast. Today we're talking about a deal in Jacksonville. We're going to learn why syndicators still suck at math. We're going to figure out that you don't want to overpay for debt. And it's important to remember that there's always a reason to live in an apartment building, and it's often price, and you shouldn't forget that.
Today's podcast sponsor is RE Cost Seg, the premier provider of cost segregation studies founded by my friend Mitchell Baldridge. Are hefty tax bills eating into your real estate income? RE Cost Seg can help you save significantly on taxes and increase cash flow. Their expert engineers uncover opportunities for accelerated depreciation, delivering accelerated tax savings and valuable insights. With over $225 million in tax savings for clients, they're here to support investors of all levels and sizes. Visit RE Cost Seg, RECOSTSEG.com/REA pod for a free proposal and start saving today. All right. Well, Elliot, do you want to give us a report from your Airbnb in Austin? I love how it really reflects your personality with from decor.
From the Austin Sunset. Let me get out of the way so people who are watching can see. I'm staying at the Austin Sunset Retreat, which is in Southwest Austin. I have never seen sunset. The fencing around the pool is 10 feet high. I'm on a 1/8 of an acre size lot. Everything in the house is stamped Austin Sunset Retreat. It's one of those things where an Airbnb host Googles how to be an Airbnb host, and then they just brand every piece of Tupperware and your toilet paper and anything like that. And yeah, it's been, and I mean, our host is a nice guy. I will give him that, so I'm not going to dump on him. But just the whole aesthetic here makes me think, I hope most Airbnb hosts get zeroed out and go back to working as the assistant chef of the month at Applebee's, and we give up the hospitality shit, where all Airbnb hosts have figured out is it's all of the hotel shit with none of the hotel scale. And knuckleheads are running around. They're like, I'm going to buy more houses, and I'm an SFR guy. No, you're not. You're just guy named Dave. You don't know what you're doing.
Going back
this
a couple podcasts
sucks.
ago when we were talking about the Phoenix, we need to come up with like a Coke can valuation for Airbnbs or a Coke can-esque evaluation.
I joked around on Twitter a while ago that the best strategy for Airbnbs is you find a nice neighborhood, you buy the shitty house, you remove the insulation, you encourage parties, like you supply a free keg with every booking, and you just crater the home values of the people around you. And then after you fully up the neighborhood, you buy up these boomers' homes at a discount, you shut down your Airbnb, you wait for property values to rise, and then you sell houses.
I like that. It's thinking outside the box, Elliot.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost as predatory as reverse mortgages.
Or timeshares,
That's really
right?
what I was going for. Yeah. Oh man, Michael, you weren't kidding. This place is called the
No, it's
Ainsley.
the Ainsley.
It's just
no,
a
the
made up
Ainsley.
name. Nice.
I've been wanting to make that joke.
Yeah. God. Yeah. You know that it was like 3 guys named Parker, Chet, and Tripp sitting in a room going, what should we call this place?
Yeah.
Oh, let's call it the Ainsley. Well, should we paint it? Oh, bro, we should definitely paint it. Should we do anything else?
Well,
No.
I think on that topic, should we do a quick round the horn on what's new this week?
Yeah, we should.
And I guess, Elliot, you started with us on the Airbnb, but any interesting stories from the residential real estate / management perspective?
Nothing too terribly interesting, but Michael will appreciate this. We have been trying to hire a head of asset management, and we had a candidate who was fantastic. And it was between us and a really large institutional shop. He was looking sort of more entrepreneurial and a piece of the promote versus a larger shop. He ended up going with the larger shop. Before you even made him an offer, he just called. He was a stand-up guy about it and said, I'm going this direction, which sucks. So we're kind of back at square one. looking for another head of asset management. So if you're listening, if you're one of the 3 people listening, I would encourage you to send me your resume because I'll pay you an eye-watering amount of money. But yeah, not a great story, but we lost a guy who I was excited.
Well, I'll go ahead and send you my resume after this, since pretty slim pickings in terms of any revenue from the transactional brokerage space.
Well, if you sell the Ainsley, I suspect you won't need my.
What about you, Eric? What's good this week?
I learned about one of the best real estate business models I've heard of in a while. I met a guy who buys dive bars from alcoholics, and so he did his first one, I guess about 8 years ago. Buys the bar and the property included. And when you buy these things, there's no books, records, or anything, so you got to be pretty sharp on that. But he's got some insider ways of talking with suppliers, talking with lottery ticket folks to triangulate to what the sales are. And his business plan is to just buy these things, run them a little better. Anyway, with the first one, paid $350,000 for it, got it paid off, including the property, in 3 years. He's since done 4 more. He's got 5 of these joints. All the property's paid for. Cash flow is now bumping up against $2 million a year.
Okay.
His total invested capital in the thing is about $1.5 million. The total Capex improvements across the 5 properties was $100,000.
Wow.
So
Jesus.
You take that and put that up against, just about anybody I know in the real estate business, and he's kicking their butt. So anyway, he wanted to meet and ask for, he was looking for my advice on what to do next, and I said, dude,
Buy more bars.
I think I need your advice on what to do next. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how close does he have to be to the operation of these things? Because that's the problem with owning a bar is it's not Tuesday
Even
morning.
better. Get this. So now he's got, he doesn't go to them at night. He said he's got a terrifically hardworking guy that's been with him about 7 years. Pays him good money, and what he pays him is above the line on the numbers that I gave you. So this guy's married. He's got 3 kids. Doesn't set foot in the thing after dark.
It's a good gig.
Yeah,
love it.
That's pretty sharp. Yeah.
How about you, Mr. Girdley?
It's been a quiet week after a stressful year. I'm very thankful for that. But my super top secret real estate development project that I'm going to tell you guys about at some point, we had another approval meeting. So that's only 12 so far. So they've all gone well. So I'll keep you posted.
Well, hopefully we don't make it to a baker's dozen.
We're going to planning and zoning next week. So.
And this is for your short-term rental in Austin?
Yeah. I am Mr. Eat, Pray, Love when you think about it. Yeah. This is the craziest project I've worked on. So I will keep teasing you with that until I can tell you about it. So,
Brett, you kind of had the biggest news of the week, the biggest trip.
Yeah. Again, sorry for missing last week, but was in Hyderabad, India for the week, and I'd never been to India before. I don't know if that's a shocker, but is an incredible trip and a good perspective getter or resetting of expectations. And I was blown away with Hyderabad in particular, and just how many international companies are making big bets there, from Microsoft to Deloitte, and the list goes on. And Hyderabad is essentially the Silicon Valley of India, and just the amount of construction going on in Hyderabad alone was probably more than the top 10 cities in the U.S. combined. There was probably 50 plus high rises going up throughout the city, residential and office.
That must have been awesome.
Yeah. It was.
How long were you there?
I was there for about 8. I was there for 8 days. It takes 2 days to get there and 2 days to get home. So, yeah, it was really cool. Feel very fortunate to have done that.
Man.
Yeah, man. So back in the saddle now. and trying to get on East Coast time. But well worth the journey. Like most things in life, you just got to show up. You never know. You never know what's going to happen.
That kind of stuff. I was fortunate that when I was younger, I got to do a lot of traveling, and because story for a different day. But I traveled a bunch when I was younger, and the big takeaway for me was always how
Right.
amazing some of these other cultures are, and how lucky you are just to have just the shit luck to be born in the U.S. I mean, how many people I think don't
Without a
fully
doubt.
appreciate that perspective?
Without a doubt. I saw Tom
You should
Segura
travel
before
more.
I left, and he said the same thing. He said, if you get invited to travel, no matter where it is, just do it. Yeah, just go. So,
Just go.
well, I guess is a good time to dive into our deal of the week here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hyderabad
right.
and Jacksonville, both cultural melting pots and
That's
top
exactly right.
destinations
That's
for world
exactly right.
travelers.
So the deal we're going to talk about this week is a deal that's currently being marketed called the Ansley on the north side of Jacksonville, so kind of up by the airport, and 225 units, 1988 vintage, and you know the play here is a value add on top of a value add, and I think just kind of take a step back for the listeners' benefits. You know, I think in 2017 through 2019, this is the type of deal that would get 30 plus offers and 9 rounds of best and final. And you know, you fast forward to today, and I think Elliot, you're going to be able to speak to this in a little bit more educated than I will, but you know, kind of the thought here is you're going to, you know, do everything, vinyl plank flooring, upgrade the appliances, and increase rents 150 to 175 bucks a month. And I know we talk about this a lot. I think the market has certainly shifted from older vintage deals that have a value add component to, it seems to me, I mean, 50% of the transaction volume last year in the multifamily space was 2017 vintage and newer. So I think the value add plays tough to make work today, just from a cost of the renovation plan. And then in addition, I personally think rents are going down everywhere in the country right now, and leasing fundamentals are not improving. And so the thought process about buyers having conviction and spending $8,000 or $10,000 per unit to get 150 to 175 bucks is a tough proposition for a lot of groups to build conviction around. And I think one of the other interesting things about this deal in particular is the assumable financing component, which we can maybe get into kind of you know, here in a little bit. But you know, curious to get your thoughts, Elliot and Eric, in terms of value add multifamily today, and kind of how you guys are thinking about it and how the folks you're talking to are thinking about it.
Eric, you want to hammer that first? I'm taking notes here.
Well, I don't know. It seems that in this overview, they kind of outline how much work has been done, and they changed out these cabinet fronts and they changed out that cabinet front, and just as sort of bait for the next guy to come in and change out the remaining cabinet fronts and put in some vinyl flooring and a backsplash, and in return for that, get a free $175 a month upgrade. My question with these projects in this environment are, if it's that easy, why aren't you doing it?
Right.
Well, the seller hates money, right? Eric. Every one of them always has hated money since the time
Especially
they started
spending
selling.
their own money, right?
If you were, Brett, you know these, you know what's going on in the market right now for this kind of junk. Is would your guess be that that it's somebody that's jammed up, that they are seeing exactly what you're seeing, that the costs are prohibitive to move forward, and that the rents are not what they believe them to be, so they got started and are now trying to exit? Or do you think that was the business plan to begin with? Take a few small steps, prove out that the dream is possible, and then sell it without actually having to go through the work. If you were betting which of the two camps, or is there a third camp, do you think that this one falls into.
Yeah, I think that was always an interesting dynamic. You wanted to buy a deal that had no renovations done to it, so you could kind of pick and choose the strategy there, whether it's testing out kind of a 10 to 15,000 per door renovation or improvement plan, and then you wanted to prove that out and sell it as quickly as possible, so you could do exactly what you were just saying, Eric, kind of convince the next guy you could continue doing that and increase value through increasing rents. And at some point in time, you get to a point where the deal has been fully renovated, and the upside potential on the deal becomes pretty limited, even when the market was going bonkers. And so at some point, you just kind of can't convince yourself or anyone else that there's more to do on the renovation plan. And so then it turns into kind of a coupon clipper, where what I mean by that is it's just somebody looking for consistent cash flow, targeting a lower return. But Elliot, you probably are going to say, Brett, you're an idiot, which wouldn't be the first time, but is that generally kind of the way?
No. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. A couple things stick out to me right away. One, this is the type of product that the syndicator crowd loves. It's the 70s, 80 built stuff. And the syndicator crowd, which I use with the appropriate amount of derision, is typically guys who don't have any idea what they're doing. They raise capital from retail investors, 50 grand, 100 grand at a time. They do these webinars and they talk about passive income, and there's a lot of them that are out there. It works until it doesn't, basically, and so they would be buying this kind of stuff. They'd be naming it the Ainsley or the Judson at Water Chase or whatever, and they would paint it, and they'd put in some subway tile backsplash, and they'd jack up the rents, and they would conflate broad market pressure on rents going up with their unique, unbelievable brilliance as a syndicator. And what typically happened was that they would, and what I always look for in these kinds of deals is they would cut back, or they just wouldn't address critical systems. And in something of this vintage, oftentimes they wouldn't spend the money upgrading the plumbing, hot water heaters. They wouldn't spend money on the roofs or shoring up foundations or replacing HVAC systems, condensers and air handlers. All of the shit that you need to have an apartment that someone's going to pay you for. Like you can swap out appliances and fixtures and it looks nicer, but if the foundational pieces of housing aren't working, people aren't going to stay. Your turnover is super high. So that stuff tends to be expensive. It tends to get overlooked. That's kind of like the first thing that I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the value add pitch and saying, one, do I believe this $150 rent mark to market, which may actually be the case here. I don't know this one well to say it's not. But are the comps that I'm pegging against, are they trending down? Like, am I getting a good deal on the piano that's falling out the window? If I get in there and I start saying, well, we can get $150 rent pump because, the Girdley across the street is also getting this premium, but their rents are coming down. So by the time I own it and I close and I start swinging a hammer, there is no premium. That's just sort of the thing that I worry about.
Well, you've got to be careful using the branding, the Girdley, because I think that's already trademarked, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah.
So
No, you know what? The next up housing project I buy, like the Sinaloa cartel selling fentanyl out of the place and people shooting each other in the parking lot, I'm gonna rename that shit the Girdley. We're gonna have a ribbon cutting, and the logo is gonna be like a penciled stencil of Michael's profile. That's exactly what it's going to be. And Girdley Heights or Girdley Terrace or something.
All the property management phone numbers and after hours stuff just forwards directly to my cell. That's what you should do.
Directly to your cell. Unhappy?
Yes.
As Drake would say, call him on his cell phone late at night when you need his love.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's in the market right now. That's what's going on with the rent story. That's what people are kind of looking at, is how much do I really believe this mark to market, and how much of it is rents are coming down.
And I think you touched on a few things there, Elliot, in terms of the foundations falling apart, and just the 1988 vintage deal just has some functional obsolescence that you just can't fix. And so I think a lot of renters today are looking for the cool clubhouse, the Instagrammable moments, whatever the heck that means. I'm not really sure. And then, most of these deals have 8-foot ceilings, and there's just not much you can do to that at the end of the day. And, kind of what you're selling essentially, what's this, a 30-plus-year-old deal. and some of that stuff you just can't fix no matter how much money you spend on it.
I really can't imagine.
The
I
only way
can't
8-foot
imagine
ceilings.
right now it really makes me nauseous to think about owning this or being responsible for people's money in this. This has to be maybe the single worst deal that I've seen in all week. It's being a prisoner to competition and having the worst possible tool to work with. It's just completely horrible.
Well, and so let's try to let's on that note, Eric, let's take a maybe try to find some positives here. Unfortunately, here Elliot's exactly right. If you look at kind of the sales history here, it's not Blackstone or Lone Star that it's syndicators, it's private groups that probably most people haven't heard of. Unfortunately, here the last sale closed in February of 2020, so well before the euphoric nature of the real estate business, specifically multifamily, second half of 2021 and first quarter of 2022. So I would say for them, they're happy they bought this in February of 2020 versus February of 2022, because I would imagine this would have traded for 2x. And
It's probably worth what they paid, roughly, right? And it's probably worth what they paid.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. They paid just under 100 a door, which feels like is what it would trade for today. So I think that's probably going back to Eric's question of why are they selling it now. I think this is kind of a take the money and run thing, and kind of quote unquote, at least we didn't lose any money, which we're starting to see more of those sales kind of happening across the country.
Yeah.
So they say here the Fannie Mae note is interest only through July 2025 at basically 5.5% interest, and then it kind of smells like there's a debt cliff coming up on this, that this thing is going to go underwater very quickly. Speaking as somebody who wants to own nothing like this, that's my level of understanding of it. But
Yeah.
Well,
So Eric made a good point. Eric made a great point. This is not this. The idea of owning this makes him nauseous. Makes me nauseous. There's always a reason that people want to live in an apartment building, and it's often price. And if there's just always a reason, and it's often price. And if the pitch here is to remove the price competitive nature by doing this mark to market, that's a razor's edge.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, whether it's newer product, which we typically work in, kind of deals that are coming out of lease up. But I think across the board, it is just tell me what the price is every month, and I can kind of justify living there. And I'm a big believer in the play of masses versus the classes today. And so I would say the good thing here, as Girdley brought up on the financing component, I think these guys are very, very happy they have a Fannie Mae loan versus some debt fund bridge facility, because the agencies didn't get out over their skis in terms of leverage. This is a fixed rate loan. So I think if this was a debt fund deal, and what I mean by that is a non-regulated lender, to a certain extent, they're getting their money from regulated lenders. They were going much higher in the capital stack, and those loans are kind of what we're reading in the headlines. I mean, there's going to be some pain for people that were going up to 75 or 80% on first quarter 2022 deals.
So, Eric, do you deal with loan assumptions at all? Does that tomfoolery happen in your space?
Yeah, on occasion, and I think that can have, coming up, there's going to be some real value in some of those things where maybe there's, 10 years left on a 2020 loan. I think there can be real value in this. I don't feel like this has enough term to make it worthwhile, and you're kind of wide open to a reset. I don't get it. I tell you what it reminds me of. This will be. I lived in Jacksonville at one point, and my son was going to a summer camp after we had moved, and they had a father-son kind of weekend where everybody brings their kids up and they go around the room and say, where are you from? Anyway, this one gentleman mentions that he's from Jacksonville. And so I go to him and I say, I love Jacksonville. I had this great old house, but it was a absolute dump. Let me tell you, everything was falling apart on that place, and I was so happy to scrape it off my shoe. Took me like a year to sell it. So where do you live? And so you can imagine how this plays out. And he goes through the street that he lives on, and I said, "Oh, really? Wow." And I'm trying to kind of get out of the conversation, and then it turns out that he is the guy that bought this house. And we had
No.
a bit of a laugh about it, but I think this might somebody's doing the same thing, or going to be doing the same thing with this apartment complex.
It's rare you get to meet the bad
Okay,
guy.
all right. We're going off topic for a minute, but which camp was this, Eric?
It's called Camp High Rocks up in North Carolina.
Okay, quick funny story. I did a father-son camp last summer. It's one of the funniest things I've experienced as a parent. So long story short, we go up there for a weekend. My son was 9 at the time. My son is a guy that can kind of fit into any situation, funny and kind of figure it out kind of deal. And so we go to this camp. You're in a cabin with 10 other people you've never met before, which is kind of weird. And this is like a true cabin. And so I think we're having a good time. And at lunchtime, he's like, "Dad, can I talk to you over here?" And he said, "This is fucking terrible." And I had no idea how to respond to that. Like literally kind of just stunted me there. And I was like, well, let's just give it like 20 more minutes or 30 more minutes. Let's do the next activity. And he comes up 5 minutes later and goes, "I want to be very clear with you about something, Dad. I am not going to camp here this summer." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, I'm going to be very clear with you, William. I'm not staying another night in this cabin." So it was in Northeast Alabama, and we left, kind of threw all the stuff in the car, and we were at the Braves game by 7 o'clock for first pitch that night. So I'm a big believer, as I said before, make it memorable, and that will be an experience that I never forget. For a 9-year-old saying, "This is effing terrible, I'm getting out of here."
That's awesome.
So to get this back on track quickly, maybe we could spend a minute or two talking about the valuation of these assumable debt deals with what's going on, because I think that's important, and we've seen some big misses on that side.
I think it's super important. I think if you're listening to this and you have some inclination towards buying multifamily or have some experience with multifamily, the problem with this pitch of "you're going to assume the loan" is that what they're implicitly saying is that you're going to pay more because we have a lower interest rate, right? If the biggest piece of the capital stack is cheaper, you can theoretically pay more. You saw that happen when rates were super low, people could pay more. So now what you're talking about is you've got this sort of albatross in the market where your property has an interest rate that is much lower than market. Now this 5.48, it's not much lower, but broadly, that's the pitch, right? And so the challenge there is that you're really going to pay an inflated basis. You're going to pay more per door to generate the same return. And I just think that that's a mistake. I think because once your loan is done, your entry point was higher. And so you better love the loan. Like Eric said, it better be 10 years, full-term IO. It's got to be really attractive, not marginally attractive, not 3 years left or something like that. And you have to think, why would I buy this deal? If we're solving for a 15% IRR, I'm going to buy Brett's deal with assumable loan at 100 a door, or I'm going to buy Eric's deal that's free and clear at 85 a door. 5 years from now,
I'm happy with the 85. Yeah, exactly.
You're happy with the lower basis. Right, you're happy with the lower basis. So I think this pitch comes out all the time. Sophisticated brokers know to manage seller expectations and say, really, the only value here is the increased cash flow during the hold. That's it. And that's helpful, but that's it. You can put some nominal value on that. But people aren't just going to pile in and overbid and bid up their basis. I think the dumber brokers, they're just happy to take whatever listing, and so they put this dog shit out there all the time. They go, "Oh, it's got assumable debt." And you're like, I know how math works, but I didn't get $20 million to invest here because I'm obviously not going to do this. That's sort of how I say it to the brokers when they call. The other challenge that you've got is who's going to buy this deal, right? It's probably going to be another syndicator. Blackstone or whoever is not going to buy this deal. And so the implicit kind of pitch is that you're going to assume this loan, some of it's been paid down, or the seller thinks that the value has increased. So maybe you're going in at 60 or 65% leverage. That's the space that we are in. That's the space larger funds are in. It's 60 to 65% leverage and the rest is equity. But that's not the space the syndicators are in. These dummies will crank up the leverage. So they're looking at a 65% loan as not enough dollars. So now they have to go and get a secondary, they have to get mezz or prefer, they have to do all the dumb things that put them in this exact position that they're in. So it's kind of a weird mismatch in that it's the wrong product type for an institutional buyer who's going to be okay with that leverage point. I think if you have brand new construction and assumable debt at that entry point, then you're going, okay, well, I've got a lot of institutional buyers are going to be thrilled with this. But it's going to be a weird execution to get the loan assumption to work for who I think will be the buyer.
Kind of on that topic, right? I mean, just not to maybe for the benefit of the listeners and not to nerd out, I mean, let's just assume interest rates are 6% flat today. Most buyers today are saying, I don't want to take on any non-accretive debt, i.e. buy a lower cap rate, a deal at a lower cap rate than the debt. So let's just assume, the cap rate 6% and the loan 6%. And then you have an assumable deal, let's say it was locked in 2021 that is 3.5%. Going back to Elliot's point there are a lot of people that just think, all right, these folks are going to solve to a 3.5 cap and a 6 cap market, and the basis makes 0 sense. Absolutely no sense. I mean, you could buy brand new property for below where some of this deal would have traded for in February of 2022. And so it's
Brett, I'm curious about you. What would entice you to take this listing on? A lot of work in putting this package together, running the process. We don't know anything about the seller or seller expectations, so I have some ideas of what they are. It seems unlikely that this might trade at a reasonable price. What would entice you to take on something like this as a broker?
Yeah, so good question there. Again, we don't work on a lot of value add stuff or product like this, and again, this was a honey hole in 2017 or 18. But I think let's focus on some positives here. I mean, if you took let's just say you back up 2.5 years from today, everybody wanted the $150 million deal. Bigger was better without a doubt. There were development deals getting capitalized like 500 unit deals. You're never going to lease up a 500 unit deal ever, even in the best of times. And so pivoting back to this, I really like the unit count at 225 units. I think it allows management to be much more strategic in terms of asset management. And once Elliot finds his asset manager, he could opine on this too, or he or she could opine on this too. But I think today, with where debt is, folks are just having to manage to occupancy on some of these bigger deals because they can't afford to have the property go to, 86, 88, 90%, whatever the number is. And so with 225 units, I'd feel a lot better. And I think there's a bigger market today for these, smaller unit count deals or lower unit count deals. And there's not a lot of groups out there that have a lot of conviction around writing a big equity check today. So if it is a syndicator, it's a lot less equity for them to raise. And so I think that's one of the appealing dynamics from my perspective, unit count and, just the fact that you're not going to have to stroke a $40 million or $50 million equity check there.
In the search for something redeeming about this deal, let's assume you could buy it at the right price, right? And your rents are the right rents. Which I think I agree with Eric. It's probably not going to trade there. But if you could get it for there, is this a particular submarket that is interesting? Like, I think we talked in one of the other episodes about why do people want to live here? Do we know? I see Eric shaking his head. This is not an interesting submarket to you, Eric? This part of Jacksonville?
I think it's just, again, the tyranny of competition is climbing all over this thing. North Jacksonville, people got to live somewhere. If you have any ability to choose, this would be low on the list.
Yep.
I think this thing, I don't know how you get to the right price on something like this because you've got this ticking time bomb of building infrastructure that hasn't been done. I think they put a new roof on it, but think about the plumbing and all that. That combined with a insurance gotcha that's ready to leap out of the closet at any time. and your whole plan is to raise rent in an area where that's your only competitive advantage, if you have one at all, other than your small size, and the small size argument is I've got less of it that I've got to deal with. There is less crap here than at least it's not 500 units of this stuff. I think that doesn't really get me too excited. So I don't know. I can't imagine that it really does trade at a price that considered all the capital costs that it would take to make this thing right.
Yeah, I think the center of gravity in Jacksonville is South Jacks, or the Seminole Town Center, or not Seminole Town Center, what's that called? St. John's Town Center, excuse me. And then working your way south down to Ponte Vedra and those areas there. And again, circling back 3 years ago, anybody could get a new development deal capitalized. And so I do think you've seen more new development up in this pocket of town. It's up by the airport, which is, I think, kind of worth noting here. And there's a high kind of industrial workforce up here, meaning there's a lot of auto imports that are coming in up here. Mercedes has a big plant, Amazon has a big facility, but it's got a lot of kind of industrial jobs up here. So it'd be hard to kind of get comfortable with increasing rents here, where you've got a much better demographic and much higher quality jobs, in my opinion, and higher paying jobs, on the south side of Jacksonville, getting into, again, the Ponte Vedra area, which gets to be pretty bougie.
Yeah, we own in Ponte Vedra.
Yeah.
That Nocatee area, and that's beautiful. But this seems like a tough pocket, and so it is. I say this often, but if your plan is to raise rent, let's say your one bed goes from $1,000 to $1,250, that's your pro forma. You think we can renovate and put in this backsplash and the sink and get $1,250? Is there a $1,250 one bed renter in that market, regardless of what your shit looks like? Are they going to stay? Or if you can pay $1,250, do you move into a different market? Eric's saying this is maybe not the most desirable market. Once you can pay $1,250 for a one bed, you're probably more inclined to leave than stay. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's not a big school system driver, it's not an employment driver here. It's really, it's rent seeking. So if your plan is to push beyond the comfortable level in the market.
Well, we did work on one deal up in, very close to this deal, and this is, albeit pretty far, it's North Florida, but I'm telling you, this feels like the old South too, which has nothing to do with this deal. I mean, you still see Confederate flags and some weird stuff up in North Jacksonville.
I do appreciate how I went through just the photos on Google reviews of the histories of this, and the value add over the past 10 years or so has been changing the color of the buildings every 2.5 years. They've gone blue, beige, red, and yellow.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So bluesy.
The way these reviews are written as well, these are value shoppers in terms of they're there for the price.
And Elliot, in your experience, given that you've diversified your portfolio here over the last, kind of 2 or 3 years, and from a property management perspective, which you've had some very interesting stories on this podcast over the last month or so, would you say renters at a kind of Class A 2022 vintage deal, or renters at a 1988 vintage deal that's getting new paint every other year, who are the more challenging residents from your perspective? Well,
boy,
I wanted
question.
to put you in the layup line, so let's see your skills.
Yeah. Obviously, the Class A renters have a lot. They're not as hard on the place. They're, they can be a little bit more demanding as far as come fix this light bulb, come fix this, but it's a lot less repairs and maintenance on the newer stuff than the older stuff. Although, quick sidebar, we've got this deal in Nocatee, and I was reading through work orders when we were buying it, just to see if there are any themes. Like, anytime you buy a deal, you should read all the work order logs to see if it's just individual one-off shit, or if there's a theme happening, if there's something structurally wrong with the air handlers, or who knows. One of the reviews was, it wasn't a review, it was a work order request. It was, can someone please come change the light bulb above the stove? Also, I'd need spider spray. I was in my bathroom. I saw a black widow on the wall. I went to look for something to kill it, and then when I came back, it was gone. And so now I think there's a black widow lurking somewhere in my apartment. And I read that, and I was like, I just move. I would just leave. I would just leave all my shit there and walk out the door and never, ever, ever come back.
So
I don't
either.
think it was actually a black widow, but that was my favorite.
What was I
work
think one of
order
the
request to
responses
read.
about the light bulb is, can you be an adult and go somewhere and buy a light bulb? How do you get to the point where you're renting an apartment and can't change a light bulb by yourself?
I also find this
Yeah,
the
it should be survival.
amusing that somebody put this map together that's in the package, and it's got a big red bullseye on the location, and it's surrounded by the closest restaurant is Jack's Fish, Shrimp, and Chicken, which is next to the U.S. Social Security Administration building down the street from the Beauty Depot Supercenter, which is across from the Sam's Club. And if you go to the next exit down, you can go to Junior's Seafood Restaurant and Grill, and you continue up that road to get to the tire outlet. So I look at that, and that gives me the layout of this neighborhood. And then you scroll a little further and see that the business plan is to raise rents.
Yeah. Good cross section of America at those restaurants and Social Security office and the Tire Depot. You would no doubt have some interesting people watching, I think, when you were visiting any and all of those places. It'd be like
Well, and that's great. Everybody's got to live somewhere,
Eric, you're not
but
looking
it's
to
like
track on retail?
I mean, to me, that's the last crowd I want to be trying to crank the rents on.
right. 100% agree. 100% agree.
Agreed. Yep.
And so let's see.
Eric, if this podcasting career doesn't work out for you, I'd love to hire you to do motivational speeches to my team. I think it'd be nice to have you come in and quietly say you're all up, and here's the mistakes you're making.
Let's go back to the map.
Now,
I think
now
you could
one,
make hay doing that.
now one of the
Yeah, let's
I
go
think
back
one
to
of
the
the
map.
nice things about, and I think this is a little bit further away, but the River City Marketplace is a legit power center or lifestyle center with places that you kind of would want to eat. But I think that's a couple exits away, if I'm not mistaken. But it is very spotty up here. I agree with Eric's sentiment there. And one of the things that I heard a gentleman from UBS say this, where we do raise joint venture equity for new development deals, and he said, Brett, I'm taking your call, and I'll hear your cool story about this deal because his wife at the time worked for the company I was working for. But he said, I'm going to go ahead and tell you the answer is no, and we have always considered Jacksonville to be a money-burning market from a development perspective. So that's something that I've never forgotten about Jacksonville. And when you look at kind of the major MSAs in Florida, Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, and then Miami, Fort Lauderdale, if you want to say that, this has been the least dynamic major MSA in Florida, and it's not even close, I would say, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the center of gravity in Jacksonville is the St. John's Town Center. So again, a mall / lifestyle, whatever those things are called. And you've got the beach, you've got a river. And so I just don't know how there hasn't been, more gravity kind of to some of the places that, the beach or even the river. It's really kind of a town center, which seems to be where most of the activity plays out.
What else we got, gents? Anything else on this deal? Or have we decided that Eric's going to be the syndicator who takes this down and raises $50,000 checks to close
Dennis
the funding
need a
gap?
place to invest too, man. They got to write. Dennis got to write
do.
checks somehow. They spend
They
all their
do.
day in people's mouths. They got to write a check on a deal like this.
Well,
Eric's the white knight.
Well, if
of the
Eric's
dentist.
indicating equity, I'd like to invest, and based on being in the brokerage business, I think I have $78 left, and I'm happy to roll all that in with you. But I am going to have a very specific request with my $78 investment. I do need major decision rights, so hopefully that's not a problem. Obviously, right?
Yeah,
right.
obviously. Yeah, that tracks. Yeah, of course, yeah.
All right.
Eric, I'd like to find a deal that you would like to buy because I think you're sharp. I'd like to hear something that you want to take down and go, this is interesting.
Let's find it.
Well, it's his deal
I
next
think that's
week,
on the
so
docket.
we got to have you pick out a winner, Eric.
Yeah.
That's the deal.
All
All right, gents.
I'm clicking
What's our
stop.
closing words, Girdley?
That was it. I'm clicking stop. Great job. Need a few more F-bombs, I think, to get it up to 4 stars. Elliot, maybe you can take care of Terry.
Got it.
Do better
Okay.
next
Sorry,
week.
I'll try to do better, man. I see
And I
you're
would just
talking
say,
to
I
me.
think this can go on the podcast, but based on Elliot's comments about a certain cartel earlier, I would prefer my name to be changed, maybe just to anonymous. And if you could, like, maybe put a picture, some sort of superimposed image over my face, I think I'll be sleeping better at night if you guys could do that.
We'll just change everyone's face to Michael's face.
Yeah.
Cartelis.
So, well, I think this was good stuff, guys. Hopefully the listeners enjoy what we were talking about today and maybe learned a thing or two, or you certainly learned how to cuss like a sailor, no doubt about that. But I think this was a good podcast, and looking forward to hearing any responses from the audience here.
Yeah, see you next week.
Thanks, fellas.